Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
So, how about we zoom back to standard this week?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would call it zoom back, because this is like some futuristic standard from like another dimension.
I don't know, man. You know, it's hero in first place. We got some red aggro. It's just same old, right?
I don't know, man. There is a suspicious amount of technology this week. So, yeah, I mean, good man Ben Friedman in winning the GP over in Kansas City with Esper, like Esper Super Friends or whatever, and the Esper deck here. I mean, an 8-pack at Teferis is nothing too out of the ordinary, I guess. Narset, Parter of Veils, sure. 1 Liliana to cap it off, okay. 3 Oath of Kea, I'm into it. The only creatures being 4 Hero of Precinct 1 and 4 Basilica Bellhaunt. Okay, it's a little bit of a... You know, a lot of times we see Hero of Precinct 1 in decks with a lot of creatures, but, you know, this is not completely without precedent. 3 Tyrant Scorns and a D-Spark. 1 the Elder Spell. So this is kind of just a tweaking and evolution of perennial like 9th best deck, Esper.
I thought we were at 5th best deck at one point.
No, but I'm talking about Esper Hero of Precinct 1. Esper Hero has never been tier 1. You know, like Esper Control has, but I don't know. Either way, and then to top it all off, 1 Command the Dreadhorde, a card we're going to be talking about a lot today as we go through these decks.
Oh, 1 in the sideboard and 1 in the main deck.
True.
So I actually thought that Ben's deck, it's weird because he's called 40-card Friedman, but, you know, this was a 60 to 75-card deck. I thought it's meaningfully different than the Esper Hero decks that we talked about previously in the format. So instead of the allegedly elite Guard Mage, I mean, elite is a strong word to describe an unplayable Magic the Gathering card. He's just got these 4 Basilica Bellhaunts, which are so much more meaningfully impactful. I mean, elite Guard Mage, somebody plays it in the red matchup, which is where you really want it, right? You're like, oh, I gained life, I got another card forward. I mean, they just throw any one of their 3 damage spells and just truck back. They don't like the fact that you draw a card. They don't like the fact that they use a spell in your creature instead of your face. They don't like the fact that they're a little slowed down, but they probably still kill you. But 1 Basilica Bellhaunt, I mean, it rips a card out of your hand. It's already so big that none of the main deck removal spells can kill it. And because it's, you know, by itself, right? Like after sideboarding, maybe you can have like a coil or something. But when they're taking a shock or a lightning strike out of your hand, it makes it that much harder to just get it off the battlefield. I think it's a huge difference.
You play so much mono red. I love it, man.
I mean, I think that this card in this deck is like, I'm here for a matchup. I got a job to do. Gain 3 life. Mess up your hand. Mess up your life. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just like the card anyway, but I do think that it's kind of interesting the use of the 4 Bellhaunts with such a low creature count and all the Kaya's Wraths being in the sideboard.
I mean, he can handle creatures, though. I mean, he's got Oath of Kaya, and he's got Tyrant Scorn, and, you know, I mean, these Teferis are helping get rid of creatures. And also, just not for nothing, Liliana Dreadhorde General, which is a main deck card in Ben Friedman's Esper deck, which is not typically a main deck card in Esper Hero, it's a really, really different card in terms of the impact it has on the game. Like, used to be you could play against a control deck, you know, an Azorius adjacent control deck, and you can slam down a Carnage Tyrant, and they would have to respect that, right? They can't counter it, and it's not that they can never kill it, but it's hard. But with Liliana, there's just so many ways that you can handle one, right? You can just block it with a bunch of things. You can make them sacrifice it. I think it's just very, very different in terms of a deck that doesn't normally have any Kaya's Wrath's main deck. It's doing some extra work there.
Yeah, and the not just as a like another way to go big, but I mean even like just from an anti-hex proof perspective. Like, people are still playing stuff like Chromium or obviously Carnage Tyrant comes up from time to time. And if you don't have access to Kaya's Wrath, having just like a couple cards, having one or two cards in your deck that can actually give you outs to that is kind of, a nice added dimension.
Yeah. What did you think about the Elder Spell in this deck?
Dude, I'm all in. I'm all about these 1+2, the Elder Spell packages and stuff. As long as you got somebody worth pumping up like Teferi, Hero of Dominaria.
Lily's okay.
Or Liliana. That's one of the other advantages of Liliana here.
Yeah, so
I'm into it.
That this deck, it's obviously playing cards that have been played. It's playing cards that have been played in various strategies. But I think this is a very different deck in terms of an Esper hero deck, right? It's less offensive, but has better creatures, I think, overall. And then it's got so many like control-ish elements. Like I think you can get away with not having those Wraths in the main deck because it's got card advantage in the form of Escansa the Sunken Ruin and Narset, and you're just like, I think that just
all 12 of these Planeswalkers are card advantage centric, and both of these creatures are possible sources of card advantage. I mean, this is definitely a deck that has access to some card advantage.
Yeah, I really like the hero in this deck, not because I think that the hero is just a great offensive card, although it looks like one sometimes. I actually just like casting spells with the hero in play, such that you just keep putting out 1/1s and they can just defend your Planeswalkers.
I can see it. I just like the fact that this deck is keeping its gold cards that are very mediocre to a minimum. Traditionally, these Hero of Precinct 1 decks are always just so chock full of mediocre 2 and 4 cost split cards and try-hard variations just so they can occasionally get a 1/1 if their hero lives.
You're not a big fan of Discovery Dispersal?
Yeah, I'm just saying that I'm glad that we're keeping it. I still think it's a little sketchy main decking D-Spark. Well, I just think that so many of the Planeswalkers that you want to kill cost 3 or less.
Yeah, and then on the other
3,
hand, though,
exactly, but
you're gonna hit the lottery on a Phoenix every once in a while. I think that not having Mortify is a different thing. Right?
Yeah,
that's a pretty kill your darlings move.
No Mortifies, no Vraska's Contempt, no Absorb. Like, there's just a lot of things that are missing from this deck,
There's no Dovin's Veto either, right?
No Dovin's Veto.
So how do you feel about Narset Parter?
Not even in the board. How do I feel about Narset Parter Veils?
In this deck.
I like it a lot.
Yeah. I think it's good in this deck.
I think you got to be careful. 10 is already pushing it, because I think that it's really this deck is quietly a curve deck. Like you've got 4 Hero of Precinct 1 and 4 Thought Scour or Thought Erasure as your 2 mana plays, and then it's rounding out the 11 with 3 Tyrant Scorns, even though they're awkward to use there, and then a Search for Escanta. But the 3s, you've got 3 Narset, 3 Oath of Kea, 4 Teferi Time Raveler, and I think that you can't really afford to play more. And in fact, it would not necessarily be the worst to play 1 less, but I mean, they are all super good. And if it weren't for the space considerations, dude, I play 4 Narset main deck. I'm into it. The problem is I also like 4 Oath of Kea, and I definitely like Time Raveler best of the 3 in this deck. So you got to cut somewhere. So I think this is a fine mix. I think Narset is a very powerful card.
You know what my favorite thing about this particular build of this particular archetype is?
What's that?
The Lyras in the sideboard. And I'll tell you why. Because this deck is a Narset Parter Veils deck, it's obviously disincentivizing cards like Risk Factor. So some people just don't want to have Risk Factor in their deck against Narset decks. And so their card advantage direction is going to go more in line with like Experimental Frenzy. And especially, some people do this after sideboarding against control, some people don't. But like, it's so hard to take out a 5 toughness creature with a Frenzy in play. Like, you have access to all the card advantage in the world, but you can't necessarily lace 2 burn spells together with any level of predictability.
Yeah. I mean, The Thought Erasure is also such a great way to lead into Lyra.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's just like a fair game of Magic. You can go like Thought Erasure, and then just kind of like beat them up a little bit with an Oath, or draw some fire with the 3 cast Augusta Fairy, which could potentially take a card out of their hand, and then you get them with the Basilica Bell Haunt, and then they're like up against the ropes when the Lyra comes down the next turn.
Yeah, yeah, into it. But this was definitely not the only Super Friends deck of the weekend. The champion over in the Classic, Robert Hayes. Whew, I don't even know what you call this one. So, first of all, this is a very different style of Planeswalker deck with almost no spells. It's just Teferi Time Raveler, Tamio Collector of Tales. So for each of those, 3 Vraska Golgari Queen, 2 Nika Bolas Dragon God, 1 Sorin Vengeful Bloodlord, and then to support these 14 Planeswalkers, there's a Wild Growth Walker package with the Jaylight Rangers and Merfolk Branch Walkers. We were like, okay, I guess. And then 3 Paradise Druids for additional acceleration. And then,
any acceleration
I don't know
at all, right? There's no Llanowar Elves in this deck.
Yeah, I just meant in terms of fixing, but yeah. The Trostani Discordant, I don't even know what's going on there.
I would cut that card, personally.
And then finally, the big endgame for Command the Dreadhorde. And Command the Dreadhorde gets a lot more money in this deck than it does in Friedman's deck, because with 8 Explore creatures that are milling, and frequently gonna mill some Planeswalkers, and then in particular, Tamio, Collector of Tales, milling hard, filling your graveyard with Planeswalkers, so that when you command the Dreadhorde, you're frequently going to be able to get back 3 Planeswalkers at the same time. And then one other thing that's really important about Command the Dreadhorde in this deck is that with 4 Wild Growth Walkers, this is, not to mention a Sorin and some Vraskas, but in particular, the 4 Command the Dreadhordes are really subsidized by the 4 Wild Growth Walkers, making the life very realistic to pay.
Yeah.
Even if you're doing big amounts.
Absolutely what is going on here. So you can either just go like a fast Wild Growth Walker into Merfolk Branch Walker and Jaylight Ranger early, get a life advantage that way, so that later in the game you have a life buffer for Command the Dreadhorde. Or if you've just got all your stuff in the bin, you can cast Command the Dreadhorde, bring back Wild Growth Walker and Jadelight Ranger, Merfolk Branch Walker, etc., and then just get a ton of life gain triggers off the Command of the Dreadhorde, which is very exciting also.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I'm not totally clear on what Trostani's really bringing to the table.
A small amount of life gain.
Well, there is one thing that
there's a big thing, actually.
Yeah, the recent wave of mass manipulation decks, if you look at Kenwan Tran's 5th place BAMP manipulation deck, or BAMP mass manipulation deck, I think this does a really good job of typifying this new archetype. It's a Simic deck, a Simic ramp deck, with growth spirals and Llanowar out. Well, it instead of Nexus of Fate, your mass manipulation is your end game, and then you're actually splashing just a little bit of white into your Simic deck just to support. Teferi Time Raveler is no surprise, but Finale of Glory. And it's kind of interesting, right? Because the main thing you're trying to do is you're playing Nissa who shakes the world. Even though you're 3 colors, because you've got 4 Temple Garden, 4 Breeding Pool, 6 Forests, so that's 14 right there. And then you're getting slightly ahead with regards to the amount that you're looking for stuff. I mean, you're able to put yours down a little faster with Arboreal Grazer and Growth Spiral, and you're finding them a little bit more with the Crassus and the Jadelight Ranger.
I kind of love the Arboreal Grazer, right? Like, it's 0/3 reach for G, but this deck has 27 lands, right? So it's often gonna do what you want.
Yeah, and the ability to actually hit all your land drops. I mean, it's not just 27 land, it's 27 land plus Hydroid Crassus and Jadelight Ranger and Growth Spiral and Llanowar Elves. I mean, this deck is really trying to get down Nissa Who Shakes the World ahead of schedule so that it can just Finale of Glory or Mass Manipulation and go completely over the top of somebody. Mass Manipulation for X4, 4 copies is like, clearly you mean business.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is a deck that, remember, if you just have Nissa Who Shakes the World, it's not unreasonable to think that at the next turn you're going to frequently have, 8 or 10 mana and do some real big manipulation.
Yeah, so this deck is really exciting. I think in terms of like what it can accomplish in a game, it might be just hands down the most powerful strategy in Standard. Because that mass manipulation powered by Nissa Who Shakes the World, I mean, people are playing awesome things, right? Imagine you're playing Command.
Planeswalkers in particular. I mean, the ability to steal 2 Planeswalkers at once is like...
Yeah, or especially if you're Command the Dreadhorde, right? So you've just invested a ton to get those Planeswalkers in play. Mass manipulation does a really, really good job of turning that around. The really subtle thing here, I think, is Teferi Time Raveler just ensures that your big spells will resolve, right? Like, you could have a fistful of Dovin's Veto, but if Teferi Time Raveler is stuck, which is very, very likely to stick in a context of Arboreal Grazer and Llanowar Elves so fast, could hit it on turn 2, then, that mass manipulation will hit. Or, Entrancing Melody after sideboarding, etc.
And see, to kind of circle back to the Tristani's Discordant, I think so much of the power of mass manipulation is coming from stealing the Planeswalkers. And Robert Hayes' list is, definitely most of its powerful permanents are Planeswalkers. And Tristani's anti-stealing ability only affects creatures. So, I don't even, you're not even getting your money's worth there. It's really just about making a couple lifelink 1/1 soldiers that are getting +1/+1 from Tristani. And I think it's just kind of a random other dimension for your Nico Bolas deck,
That's a great point. My head went to Tristani defending against mass manipulation. That's only, half the battle.
Yeah, and it's not even the important half against 5-color Dreadhorde. I mean, against, when it's stealing Planeswalkers. So Scott Matthews' runner-up deck is definitely a fairly pure Jeskai Super Friends deck with Narset, Teferi Time Raveler, and also Saheeli as a 12-pack of 3-cost Planeswalkers so that they can use Mox Amber to help get Sarkhan the Masterless down a turn ahead of schedule. 4 copies there, with no copies of Teferi 5, notably.
I was shocked.
And then Karn as a backup walker.
How do you not have Teferi 5 in this deck?
I don't know. I don't know what you're trying to prove.
Like, I feel like Teferi 5 is just a perfect card for this strategy. Like,
I do like Sarkhan the Masterless better in this deck. But I don't know why you only have to play 4.
I agree. But for a Mox Amber deck, with permission and opt in,
I don't know if I would call it with permission. It's got 3 copies of Spell Pierce.
I mean, I'm just saying, you got Saheeli. This thing's giving you 2 extra mana per turn, and it's putting something you can cast in your hand. Let's go.
Yeah. I'm not sold on 4 Saheeli in this, but I don't know. Maybe I just always underestimate Saheeli compared to the world, but
I think Saheeli in this deck, I mean, it's a lot of hits, right? The not hits are all on the sideboard.
Can you just Saheeli and then drop Mox Amber immediately, and you're just there?
That's actually Saheeli drop Mox Amber and then launch
hold up Spell Pierce, shock or opt.
That's good. That's some good magic. I feel like you should play more Mox Amber then.
Dude, I don't know about these two mobilized districts. Maybe they're okay.
It's like really, really easy to get them to activate for cheap. That's the
Yeah,
like
guess.
it's really easy.
Okay. It could be okay. I just like having my colored mana.
So, what do you think about Prison Realm? Like, I've played against this deck a lot in paper, and people are always like siding in Prison Realm. It just seems like kind of slow. Like, you have so many things that cost 3 already, most of which are pretty good at defending the battlefield.
I don't know. I mean, you want to have some. You want. I don't know. I like it. I mean, I kind of want to go after somebody's planeswalkers.
Yeah, but I mean, in my case, they're just getting like a 3/3 first strike.
They're boarding it in against Mono Red?
Yeah, every time.
Oh, I don't know. That doesn't make any sense.
That's what
to me.
I'm saying, right? Like, you have tons of
Yeah.
things that cost 3 that are good,
Yeah. Plus, the red deck has tons of things that are good that cost less than 3, and you don't want to prison realm those things. I was more excited about the prospect of doing things like having access to a little bit of prison realm in order to hit somebody else's planeswalkers, you know. But like the fact that Prison Realm doesn't even like hit Experimental Frenzy, which is like one of the few cards that they might play that cost more, they'd have to be pretty sure you're on Chandra's, I guess. I don't know. I don't love it against red. That seems slow to me.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. I have
Yeah,
been
no,
I have
that's
been
not. I don't think that's the matchup for it.
struck by the Spell Pierce many times though. The Spell Pierce, all because I'm just like lulled into this sense of nobody's playing Permission because of Teferi, and I just forget that this deck just has Spell Pierce.
Lots of it too. What do you think of Abraham Stein's? Abraham Stein's list, also in the top 8. He was similar deck, very very similar deck. One less copy of Karn and one less copy of Saheeli to make room for a copy of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and a copy of Lightning Strike.
I'm a big fan of having that Teferi in the deck. I think like Lightning Strike's a good card, but it's weird to me because I think its best synergy is with the Saheeli that he cut.
Yeah, but I mean, Saheeli's not that good anyway.
I'm like pretty cool on Karn in this deck. Like, how do you feel about
Same.
Karn? I think
Nah.
the other
Karn, I could
take.
take. I could leave Karn. I could take or leave Karn. You want to play Karn the Creator
Oh, I love Karn the Creator in Standard. I think that card is awesome.
in this deck?
Yeah,
What are you gonna?
there's tons of cards that people can get that are good. You could
Yeah,
get.
but you don't want to use your sideboard spots that way. This deck's sideboard's great.
That's true. That's true. I've been.
I
Playing,
like it in Standard. I think that's sweet. I just don't know that this is the Jess guy. Just seems like a weird spot
Yeah,
for
it's
it.
all. It actually, now that I think about it, there are some arguments to be made that it might be the worst place to play it because one of the
Yeah.
reasons that Karn the Great Creator is so good is because you stick it, you get a small advantage, and then you just land an Immortal Sun, right? Like it's weird
Yeah.
that you have Immortal Sun in the same deck as Karn, but that's actually one of the main things that it does, right? Is you then like, all right, I got a +2, and now I'm locking down your entire game plan and drawing an extra card a turn. Eventually, I'm going to get there, which is a really beautiful strategy in Standard right now. And you can also get things like Sorceress, Spyglass, and I think like one of the most underplayed cards in Standard. It's underplayed for a reason. Like it's not good in other situations. It's actually, I think, really good in a Karn deck. Is Chaos Wand. Have you played any Chaos Wands?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you just take a look, he doesn't have the Immortal Sun, but Matt Corbell's Mono Green Super Friends deck makes a great use of these 4 copies of Karn the Great Creator, and he definitely, like any good Karn the Creator Standard deck, has Chaos Wand.
Yeah,
This is that one that's the 3 colorless artifact. You can tap it and pay 4. Target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile an instant or sorcery card. You can cast that card without paying its mana cost, then put the exile cards when cast this way on the bottom of that library in a random order.
Yeah, this card is fantastic in some situations. For example, if you're playing against Mono Red and you use your first Karn activation to get like a Diamond Mare to hide behind, and then you use your second one to get this, like if they don't kill you that turn, they're pretty much always going to lose. You're going to like kill every single one of their guys with one of their things, or you're going to torch face. And it's maybe even better against like the Dimir adjacent control decks, where like you're just getting them with like their own duress or thought erasure. You're like, whenever they do something, you use it in response. Maybe you'll hit a counter spell. I mean, obviously, your mileage can vary depending on which planeswalkers they have in play, but just the ability to flip over their Vraska's Contempt and take out their best card is so exciting.
Yes, I think Chaos One is a great get here, but there's a lot of other real teched out Karn the Great Creator targets. I mean, first of all, dude, Amulet of Safekeeping. So this is a 2 colorless artifact. Whenever you become the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless its controller pays 1. And creature tokens get -1, -0.
Shoot, why don't people play more of this? This thing's awesome. This just turns off like March of the Multitudes, if nothing else.
Yeah, that's its purpose here, is that as a way to reverse Anthem token decks.
Seems awesome. This deck seems awesome. I love it.
And then we've got a Fountain of Renewal as a source of life gain. We've got Sentinel Totem, I guess, because you got to exile graveyards.
Well, I mean, it's like a 1-card counterspell to like Command the Dreadhorde, right?
1 Crucible of Worlds in order to, I suppose, fuel the 2 Blast Zones, 1 Field of Ruin, 2 Karn's Bastion, which, I mean, you're not even really... It doesn't directly work with Karn's Bastion, but Karn's Bastion could be like an ideal thing to flip, I guess, from... I don't know, man. I just don't buy Crucible of Worlds.
I don't think Crucible of Worlds is great here. But if you have it, obviously the ability to go long with Field of Ruin and Blast Zone is exciting.
And Nissa, who shakes the world, man, because some of your lands are dying. So you're like, yeah!
So one of the things that I found to be really interesting in playing a lot of Standard in the last couple of weeks is that the static abilities on a lot of these Planeswalkers are so meaningful because they're operating even when the opponent has a Sorcerous Spyglass or the Immortal Sun online. Like, you still get like that Mana Flare capability out of Nissa. You still get that extra card drawing out of Liliana if some of those things are online.
Definitely. What do you think of the Transmogrifying Wand? It's got to be the best creature kill spell on the cheap, right? For a mono green deck.
I mean, it's hilarious. Yeah.
The thing that's wild to me is having I get having a copy of Meteor Golem. The 7-cost 3/3 that enters the battlefield, destroys a non-land permanent an opponent controls. But the second copy of Meteor Golem?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's also 2 copies of God Pharaoh's statue.
God Pharaoh's statue copy number 2 is pretty intense. Like, you know what I need to do? I need to get another God Pharaoh's statue.
Yeah, I'm not into that one, but I'm actually surprised at some of the cards that are missing. Like, wouldn't you want to be able to get like a treasure map?
No.
No?
Nope.
The most common card that I actually go for when I'm playing my Karn the Great Creator deck is Thematic Compass.
Yeah, but you have a leak.
I mean, I do have a leak, but it's also very good in the context where it's good.
So, dude, talk to me about Helm of the Host.
All right, so Helm of the Host is a legendary equipment. It costs 4. I don't know, like I think it's just one of these cards that, like, if you think that you're gonna get it going, it's just gonna build a substantial advantage for you, right? There's a lot of different ways that you could do that. Like, this has an assumption that they're not gonna stop your Helm of the Host guy combo.
So you're just putting you Karn, you go get Helm of the Host. Then you Helm of the Host.
It has an equipped cost of 5.
Right. So, but I'm saying, like, let's say, like, turn 4 you're on Karn, and turn 5 you're on Helm of the Host, and turn 6 you equip your guy, right? And that's where it starts rolling.
But
Like
what
you've
do you even
equipped
have
your.
that you're
That's what
doing
I'm
it?
saying, man. Like, what is it you're even doing? You're what? You're copying your Jade Light Ranger? Am I missing something?
I I don't I'm not a huge Helm of the Host guy personally. Like
Are
for
you
me,
are you copying your land that Nissa put counters on?
I mean, if you copied a Sword Tooth, you could play 3 lands, and you might be getting more than enough permanents to attack with one of them.
I don't know, man. Like, it's so weird to me. Like this deck, it's not like it's like Paradise Druid, Llanowar Elf, Arboreal Grazer, tokens from Plane-Wide Celebration, the constructs from Karn. There's not even like almost any targets. There's got is the combo that you lock somebody out with Meteor Golem? Is that what you're doing? That's
Oh,
got to be the combo, right?
yeah, that's really really slow.
Yeah, it's outrageously slow.
Okay, I'm not sure what matchup you want that in. Like, for me, I'm always terrified that my Karn is gonna die because, like, even if you're playing against like a blue control deck, you get like an activation out of Karn, and if you get the card that you want, you run the risk that they're just going to thought erasure it, right? But if you don't get the card that you want, you're like, all right, I'm just going to get a cheap +1, and then I'm going to get the card I want next turn and then cast it with my mana open, right? Like, that's the other thing that you can do. That they might just Oath of Kaya or Vraska's Contempt your Karn before you can pull it off. So that's like you're squeezed even from the blue control decks, their ability to line this stuff up. So I don't know. That's like an enormous amount of mana. Right? Meteor Golem is 7. Helm of the Host is 9. Like Karn is another 4. I don't know, Patrick. Like it's not even that good if you get it. But like I
Plus,
guess you're
dude,
getting
if you
it
just
back.
have Ugin the Ineffable in play all the time,
Like Uga is just much better, right? Like,
well, no, but you already have that, and you got to go big, man. You got Ugin the Ineffable, right?
so it makes
that
everything cheaper.
so then your Meteor Golem costs 5, your Helm costs 2, and 2 plus 5 is 7. You know, because if you have Ugin the Ineffable, the very next turn it actually curves perfect, where you can just drop Helm of the Host and immediately equip it. I don't know what you're even doing, but there you are.
Ugin the Ineffable going. I feel like you don't need this combo, right? Like you have Karn and Ugin. Like
Here's
the assumption is you have Karn and Ugin. Like what? Why? What do you need Meteor Golem for?
here's the part that I love, man. There are really no green cards good enough to sideboard.
I think
Like
they're.
I appreciate Karn the Great Creator having options in the sideboard. 15 options for Karn with no green cards. I don't know. It could be right, but it's surprising.
Try some out for you. This deck has already got Jade Light Ranger, right?
3 copies.
Yeah, I don't know. How
I would make
about
her for 4, but whatever.
yeah, same. How about Wild Growth Walker? How about Nissa's Triumph just for grinding? How about Bond of Flourishing? It's crazy to me this deck is like they figured out to play
No,
Bond
they
of
have
Flourishing.
Bond of Flourishing.
Yeah, 2. Like this deck is like so
Yeah,
centered on
but
Karn.
hold on.
Wouldn't you
They've
want
also
all
got
the
3.
Karns?
I don't know, man. Maybe you're just supposed to play more of this stuff, but they also have 3 Nissa's Triumphs. Maybe you can only play so much of this stuff. It does feel like you'd be able to play more of this stuff, though.
So this
What else are you even doing?
isn't a great Arboreal Granger deck. It's only got 24 land.
No, it is. It's got 3 Nissa's Triumphs and 3 Jailer Rangers, and it'll be even better of an Arboreal Grazer deck once we put in another Nissa's Triumph or another Bond of Flourishing and another Jadelight Ranger.
I mean, so you're going opposite with the Arboreal Granger. So you're like turn 2 Bond of Flourishing, turn 3 Arboreal Granger, so that you can like explode into 5. Is that the plan?
Nah, really, I want to go turn 1 Arboreal Grazer, turn 2 Jadelight Ranger, or Nissa's Triumph.
Yeah. So to me, that's a deck that has way more of the green cards, and then fewer and maybe more land. and then fewer of some of the planeswalkers. Like, I don't think this deck's getting anything out of having Karn, Scion, and Urza. Right? I think Carnage Creator is great in this deck. Nissa Who Shakes the World is great in this deck. Ugin is great in this deck. I think
Plane-Wide Celebration in this deck.
I think Plane-Wide Celebration is super cute. Maybe I'd play one. It's like this card costs a ton of mana, and this deck is even though it has a bunch of manipulation cards, right? So this
I
deck,
don't know. I like exactly 2 copies.
like it has 3 Jade Light Ranger, 2 Bond of Flourishing, 3 Nissa's Triumph. It sounds like both of us want to improve some of those numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to draw your cards in a certain order in this deck. Like, this isn't one of those decks you're just like, shuffle up and deal out 7 and your cards mostly do stuff. Like, you really need to do one thing and then do the next thing in this deck, and unlike a blue deck, you don't get to pick.
Yeah. Yep. When I look at this deck, but the first thing my eyes go to is the Wayward Swordtooth and the Karn, Scion of Urza, in terms of maybe some slots we can help, kick free to make room for a little bit more Bond of Flourishing and Jade Light Ranger action.
So I think Swordtooth is great. I'm not sure. It's not really exploiting what makes Swordtooth great this deck, right? Like, there's no... like when you see Swordtooth and you're like, wow, that was a really good Swordtooth deck, I think your expectation is usually that it's some kind of like an Experimental Frenzy deck or like, Bolus of Citadel, something like that, right? Or at least has a lot of land, right? And, this deck isn't really one of those decks.
No. Nope. So, either way, though, this deck is super, super, super cool.
Oh, yeah, I think it's an awesome step forward, right? But you wouldn't necessarily expect, like, the first iteration of, like, an awesome step forward deck to be the most tuned. But it's... I don't know. I think that it's awesome that this kind of a deck can exist in Standard alongside so many of these other archetypes that are very different.
So, which deck do you like better? We had just talked about a Bant Ramp deck a second ago with the 4 copies of Mass Manipulation, and I'm wondering which style of Bant Ramp you like better. Whether it's the Ken 1 Tran 5th place list we were just discussing, or the Daniel Hall 5th place list over in the Grand Prix. This is obviously a very philosophically different Bant Ramp deck topping off with Mass Manipulation. Instead of 4 copies of Mass Manipulation, he's got a 2-2 split between Mass Manipulation and Entrancing Melody. But then instead of this Planeswalker deck, he's playing so many... this 2 Frilled Mystics, 4 Hydroid Crassus, 4 Incubation Druid, 4 Paradise Druid, 4 Llanowar Elves, a Lyra, 2 Chalet, a Tolsimir, Friend to Wolves, and then his only walkers are just Teferi and Nissa Who Shakes the World. Teferi Time Raveler and Nissa Who Shakes the World. Nothing in the space of like Narset or Karn or any of that stuff.
I think philosophically, I like Daniel Hall's deck better, but I would take issue with some of the individual choices in the numbers. Like, I think that like exploitation of both some Entrancing Melody's main deck in the context of all this mana acceleration, like all these Llanowar Elves and these Paradise Druids and Incubation Druids is really powerful. And I think it's important to be able to get your defense going earlier. But like, it's weird to me. Like, I feel like Daniel Hall's deck has like a lot of good initiation and then just doesn't finish the play, if that makes any sense. Like surely you can come up with a situation where you're like, maybe I would rather have more copies of Lyra Dawnbringer than some of these other cards. Like, I don't think I would ever want a Tolsimir Friend to Wolves instead of a Lyra Dawnbringer. Right? I mean, it's probably not that hard to cast in this deck, but like, a Lyra Dawnbringer is just a way more meaningful card, don't you think?
It's a lot more reliable. You get, I guess, with... Man, it is tough. Like, if your opponent has a Lightning Strike, they can actually just kill Tolsimir with the trigger on the stack, and then you just don't even gain life, and it doesn't get to do the fighting.
Yeah,
like, I don't know. It seems to me like a bad Lyra Dawnbringer here.
The other thing is, like, there's just other things wrong with it. like, people are playing, Deafening Clarion, right? Like, that's a lot of mana to have invested in a deck that also has, like, forecasting cost 3/2s, and then a ton of small creatures that have, 1 or 2 toughness, to just also have your 5 drops get eaten by, pretty commonly played sweeper.
Yeah.
Like, I just think, like, that doesn't make much sense to me. Like, I would love to see, like, God Eternal Aketra or something.
Good point.
Like, don't you think, like, green acceleration, God Eternal Aketra, mass manipulation, and Trancing Melody at the top, like,
I would try that.
that's really, really compelling to me. Which is, it's not so different from Daniel Hall's deck, right? It's just, like, just change some of the details a little bit.
So it's a very different style of deck, but another feather deck showed up, and this time with an interesting twist. Brian Boss's 4th place list. It's got the usual suspects of Dreadhorde Arcanist, 10th District Legionnaire, Feather the Redeemed, and the not surprising to see rounding them out Adanto Vanguard, with some pretty typical spells to really capitalize on the Feather 10th District Legionnaire package, Sheltering Light, Salmon Sprint, Reckless Rage, Defiant Strike, Gird for Battle. The twist here is the use of 3 copies of Krenko Tin Street Kingpin. Whenever Krenko Tin Street Kingpin attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it, then create a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to Krenko's power, which is obviously buffed up by Defiant Strike, Salmon Sprint, and Gird for Battle.
Yeah, so I think that Krenko is a really good card in this deck. Like, let's say you play out your stuff in the first couple of turns, and they have like a 3 or 4 mana sweeper. Take out all your guys. You have 4 mana. You play Krenko for 3, and then you immediately cast Salmon Sprint, which gives it haste and also +2 power. Now, all of a sudden, you've recovered and have an army.
Right, like you're hitting them for 4 now, but then you also have 4 1/1s back. And then Krenko's still going to be a 2/3, so the next turn he's effectively hitting for 3 even if you have nothing and making an army. Like, I mean, it's great with Salmon Sprint, but you only have 2 Salmon Sprints. Are you getting enough money for it? Because, like, it's not like Gird for Battle or Defiant Strike is overwhelming with it or anything.
Well, I mean, Krenko isn't an overwhelmingly powerful card in the same way that Feather or Dreadhorde Arcanist are. I just think that it's a card that, given the fact that you're playing a deck that has, like, I don't know, 20 creature pump spells, you could just play this card and be like, all right, it's not as good as Feather, but I could still get a pretty substantial benefit by playing it. In this context.
And you like it better than Gideon Blackblade?
Oh, well, if you're going to ask me that question, no, I do not like it better than Gideon Blackblade. Gideon Blackblade is insane. I don't know why people don't just play that card. It's like, I wouldn't say it's unbeatable, but it's pretty hard to beat, right? Like, they resolve it, and then he kills you? Like, that's not what happens?
Yeah. A lot of the time. In addition to all these Planeswalker heavy strategies, there's some new Planeswalkers showing up in kind of Planeswalker light decks. Michael Byers playing with 3 Sarkhan the Masterless and 3 Domri, Anarch of Bolas. And Domri's a new one that we haven't seen too much of yet, but 3 Domri, Anarch of Bolas, and 3 Sarkhan the Masterless in Gruul midrange. This is one of those Skargan, Hellkite, Rekindling Phoenix style decks with Gruul Spellbreaker. Thorn Lieutenant's not an unheard of 2-drop to use in a deck like this, but Living Twister as another 3. So Domri, and talk to me about Domri and Living Twister.
So Domri...
Also, what about just 7 5s?
Well, Domri is awesome in these kind of decks, right? So if you play first turn Llanowar Elves and it lives, you can just drop Domri on turn 2, and then you have, like, pretty substantial acceleration. Like you said, there are a ton of 5s in this deck, right? There's Sarkhan the Masterless and Skargan Hellkite up top. But Domri, that +1 is actually, it's it's not limited, right? It's not one of these things that you can only spend it on creatures, but they get riot or something. Like you just go like first turn elf, turn 2 Domri shock, right? And then you're gaining loyalty. So like that's pretty strong, I think. You can go straight up to strike from the master list the next turn, in which case you'd be attacking for 5 or 7 because of Domri's static ability is really strong. Like it turns every Thorn Lieutenant token, every Llanowar Elves into twice the power.
It is kind of cute that you can go. I mean, this obviously they're not perfects, but Llanowar Elf into Domri into Sarkhan, and then you're attacking for 10 that turn. Or not? Yeah, I guess you're not attacking for 10, but you can attack with the Domri if you want. Really, you just make a dragon, and the next turn you're attacking for 18.
Yeah, I mean, like the Domri static ability is. I was very, very surprised at how meaningful it was when I played against this deck. It's like a Glorious Anthem for the same cost as a Glorious Anthem, and you've got all these Planeswalker abilities you can do.
Sort of. I mean, it's only the front side.
Yeah, but this deck really mostly cares about that front side, I think.
Dude, I love it when you get the Legion War Boss going with Domri. That's where the that's
money.
That's the juice.
I mean, Rekindling Phoenix and Skargan Hellkite with the Domri are not bad.
Dude, it's a living twister, huh?
I don't know. I haven't played against a lot of Living Twister, but I remember a time when Stormbind was one of the defining strategies in Standard, and it's back, and it's got its own little battery pack attached to its spitting slug-esque body.
It's a little bigger than a spitting slug. Yeah, I don't know, man. Maybe it's okay. It's obviously a big hard body, but it's interesting because there's like nothing that works with it in the deck. So you're literally just playing it because it's that good.
Yeah, but I mean, like, all right, it's a 2/5 for 3, a terrible body. It's not terrible.
No, it's definitely not terrible.
It's fine. Like, your Thrashing Brontodon's going to bump up against this and not kill it every single time. Are these 2 abilities good? Yeah, they're pretty good, I think. It's like one ability kind of stapled together, I guess.
Mostly. What's up with this new Phoenix deck? Andrew Zigas busting out Is It Phoenix with a little bit of a twist. Arclight Phoenix and Goblin Electromancer, of course, but Augur of Bolas, I guess not a surprise. 2 God Eternal Kefnet. Okay. And then a lot of, usual characters from Radical Idea, Op, Lightning Strike, Shock, Charter Course, Lava Coil, but 3 Finale of Promise.
All right.
In the main deck. Talk to me.
2 things going on here. One of them is God Eternal Kefnet. This card is spectacular in this strategy. Couple of reasons. One, you've got Opt and Radical Idea, which means that you can be drawing cards on the opponent's turn. Right? So, huge upgrade there relative to decks that can't draw cards on the opponent's turn. And especially in the case of Opt, you can be doing some really meaningful extra card advantage. But one of the things that's really, really important about God Eternal Kefnet and Is It Phoenix, beyond the fact that you've got Radical Idea and Opt, is that God Eternal Kefnet is about like the worst card for mono red. It's so hard to get through, and like it's perfect in this strategy, and it just turns the mono red matchup around. Mono red eats Blue Red Phoenix for breakfast without God Eternal Kefnet, and it will fold to just a fair God Eternal Kefnet. That's one part. The second part, Finale of Promise, this is a deck that is full of 1 and 2 casting cost instants and sorceries, so it's just like absolutely pure tap 4, draw 2 kind of extra value.
It's got a little bit of a Bloodbraid Elf thing going, right? Where you're not just making it a draw 2, you're actually affecting the board in some way. Because like one of your cards could be Lightning Strike or Shock or Lava Coil or whatever, or 2, right?
Sure.
And if you Finale of Promise back a Charter Course and a Radical Idea or whatever, I mean, now you're talking about a draw 3, right?
Well, yeah. So a couple of things.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I love Augur Bolas in this deck insofar that it is great against mono red. However, I think I would rather have Tormenting Voice in that slot if I were trying to maximize my Finale of Promise. What do you think about that? It's like Finale of Promise.
I think you need the Augur Bolas to block.
Yeah, I mean, it's really good against your worst matchup. So, I mean, actually, I don't even know how bad your worst matchup is with 4 Augur Bolas and 2 God Eternal Cabinet. This deck seems like a bear for red. And it's obviously...
I still like the red side.
I'm sorry?
I still like the red side, but you've regained some ground compared to most, I would guess.
Oh, I mean, it's. I think Kefnet's really hard to beat if it comes online. I'm surprised that there aren't more. But the Finale of Promise is not great against like Jeskai. Because Teferi cancels the Finale of Promise, right?
Yeah, Teferi Time Raveler seems pretty brutal for this deck. The thing I like about Finale of Promise is that it's a 1-card trigger for your Arclight Phoenix, right?
Yeah, that's one of the absolutely huge advantages. Like, especially if you dumped it early. If you, dumped it to Chart a Course and you're getting Chart a Course back.
I guess that's all the more reason to play Tormenting Voice. A little bit more Arclight Phoenix equity.
So, do you think that... Well, I mean, there's just some tension there, right? Like, Augur Bolas and God Eternal Kefnet are both, really drawing on the fact that the deck is full of instants and sorceries, but...
That was where I was going. Yeah, I'm with you.
They're competing with each other. That's the thing.
And it's not like God Eternal Kefnet is actually good with Finale of Promise either.
No. I think that God Eternal Kefnet is... I think Augur Bolas less, but God Eternal Kefnet mostly is just a concession to red. Because it's such a bad matchup otherwise.
So there's a piece of technology in mono red. Speaking of mono red, I'm wondering if you're predicting that this is the new normal. Harlan Firer's third place listed the classic. It's got 2 copies of Mizium Tank in the sideboard. Okay, mono red mage Michael Flores, tell me what you're doing with Mizium Tank.
So Mizium Tank is a pretty interesting card to play in these decks. So it's a vehicle, right? So on paper, it's just like kind of a 3/2 that doesn't do anything but sit there. However, when you cast a non-creature spell, Mizium Tank becomes an artifact creature and gets +1/+1 until end of turn. It also has very low crew cost. You could just have Mizium Tank in play, right? And if your opponent can't interact with artifacts, it just sits there. So if they've got like sorcery speed removal, like some sort of
or a sweeper,
yeah, doesn't kill it. But every time you cast a shock or something, you can be braining them for 4+. So, it potentially triggering this multiple times. It is a very, it's been played a little bit before. It's a very interesting card, I think. If it's me, I'd rather just play more Daredevils, but it certainly hits people.
Okay. So are you guessing there's going to be, is this going to be a recurring theme? Or do you think it's going to just be an occasional fringe curiosity?
I think it just depends on who you want to beat. Like, there are certainly situations where you've got a Mizium Tank. Like, I don't know, you could be in the mirror, and your opponent might not be able to deal with a Mizium Tank very well. Like, the Mizium Tank becomes, 3 toughness at least as a base. So, I guess they have, a good amount of removal. Like, Lightning Strike can take it out. But, you could get them... you can give them 2 +1/+1 counters, right? Right, so... I'm sorry, not +1/+1 counters. +1/+1 triggers until end of turn.
Yeah.
So, you can just turn it on, and then, they go to Lightning Strike it. You, cast another spell, and you had them blow their Lightning Strike, and now you're getting them for 5, plus whatever the spells were, right? So, I think it's really good in that situation. And it's also, weirdly, because it's 3 instead of only 2, it's less mana intensive to operate than a Daredevil against control. So, furthermore, it gives you attackers for, to take out somebody's Planeswalkers without any loss of card advantage. Right, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't played any personally. I've played against it a fair amount. I think it's okay.
So, we already talked about Jeskai Super Friends a little bit, but with 5 copies in the Classic, I am kind of curious about. There's one other little variation. I mean, one player played Ugin the Ineffable, and it's like, sure, I guess it's a fine card, right? But like, what's up with is it with Cassima? I mean, that's like fourth place Josh Feliciano. 2 copies of Casmina in Enigmatic Mentor.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, he cut the Karns, but is this even? Are you even doing anything? Is this even better? Only 1 Mox Amber.
I'm not a big fan of Casmina. So Casmina is like way more limited than it might seem. So Casmina's static ability is spells your opponent's cast that target a creature or planeswalker you control cost 2 more to cast. Right? So first of all, this deck doesn't have a lot of creatures. Right? It has like creature tokens, but it doesn't have like a lot of creatures at its base. And this deck is, I mean, it is helpful for defending against planeswalkers, but it doesn't defend against face at all. And then like the 2/2 blue wizard creatures are like that ability isn't that good. I guess looting's okay. Mm-hmm. I personally I haven't been super impressed when I've played against this card. I think like it's not that it's a bad card, it's just like there's so many cards you could be playing. For example, any additional copies of Teferi?
Yeah. Yep. Whenever I see this card, I always think, I guess it's okay. But then I always think, I guess you could just play somebody else instead. One last deck I kind of wanted to talk about from this classic was the Sultai list that Aaron Barrick played. There's a couple twists here. First of all, yet another appearance by Nissa Who Shakes the World. And then Thought Erasure in the main deck. The mix of removals a little eclectic. A Tyrant Scorn. And a Plague Crafter. And I'm wondering if you can speak to any of these things here, you know?
Well, I think the Plague Crafter is a natural fit in this deck just because it has Vivian Reed. So Plague Crafter is a removal spell that you can tutor for. Or whatever, like kind of draw into it with Vivian. I don't know if tutor is the right word.
No, I know what you mean, though. Yeah, dig too.
Material down. If your opponent just plays like a 3 casting cost Planeswalker, Plaguecrafter is a good way to interact with that, right? Versus like a Ravenous Chupacabra. Like there are a lot of decks that are just all Planeswalkers and no creatures, right? So that's a thing. Although if that's the case, I think it is a little odd to be playing only 2 copies of Vraska's Contempt in the main and not like overloading after sideboard at all. Although there's like 3 of the Elder spells. I guess you could Elder spell instead of Vivian Reed or something. That's okay.
Do you really like Cast Down main deck right now?
I think you have to have something on curve. I think that if I were going to play this, I'd probably play like 2 Assassin's Trophies or something instead. I think that
was what I was thinking. I like Cast Down as a card normally, but I feel like the metagame has kind of gone a direction where Cast Down is not the optimal 2. Just dead in too many spots.
Like I was playing a fair amount of Golgari last year, not Sultai, but obviously relatively similar available cards, and I found that Cast Down was a very, very good card to play with in Golgari, but I had it in my sideboard, not in my main deck. So like whenever I had it in the deck, then that was always in a matchup where I wanted it, and at least half the time right now, it's not that you don't have any Cast Down tokens, but your Cast Down tokens might be like a dragon token, like or something. You're spending a real card and 2 mana on not a card, or like God forbid, like a Saheeli token.
I do like that the Tyrant Scorn lets you at least like reset a Jadelight Ranger or whatever, but I feel like Cast Down is missing that added flexibility.
Maybe it's better to just play like multiple Tyrant Scorns and no Cast Down, and then like, because you could just like reset a Hostage Taker or a Crassus, like that's all really good. It's a great mention.
So, what do you like more, this Sultai deck or like something closer to the Golgari, like Cody Napier's Golgari list? This is like an this is an exotic Golgari, right? I mean, first of all, already once you're cutting all the Cast Downs, all the Vraska's Contempts, all the Tyrant Score, everything, it's just 4 Assassin's Trophies, Clearly, that's a statement. And then to be playing 4 copies of Nissa Who Shakes the World, you're like, okay, I get it. You're trying to ramp, right? But what you're ramping into is 6 sixes. An Ugin and 2 Lilianas, you're like, okay, I guess. No Vraska 6, but sure, whatever. But then 3 Casualties of War. Talk to me about Casualties of War.
I think this deck is gorgeous. I don't know if I love every single detail about this deck, but 3 Casualties of War and an Ugin? Come on. You got to appreciate that. This is like Team Desert Twister. I think that not having Vraska 6 is a little odd because you'd have even more Desert Twister action. But like for somebody who's playing Assassin's Trophy, Cody Napier is interested in being able to deal with his opponent's board, right? And he can do it with a ton of value, ton of different ways.
So, are you buying this deck versus like a blue deck?
I might for 2 reasons. One, he could just go heavy on the Elder Spell after sideboarding. I think he's not at the advantage in game 1, but I think that he could definitely hold his own and go toe-to-toe. But the Elder Spell would be helpful, and I don't know. I think it could contend. Like,
all right, and what about against
Llanowar Elves?
And what about against Mono Red when you don't draw a Wild Growth Walker?
So if you live long enough, you could hit the Planeblade Celebration. But I gotta say, I've actually found that the Wild Growth Walker stuff is way less scary than it was in previous formats. I'm not sure why.
That's what I thought. I
just keep killing them. Like, the thing is that the Mono Red decks right now are constructed with different incentives. Like, so back in the day, like when you were playing like 4 main deck Experimental Frenzies all the time, your incentives were always just to like dump every card out of your hand as fast as possible and then dump the frenzy, get it down so that you could start exploiting the frenzy, which actually left openings for the opponent to go like Wild Growth Walker and immediately get value, and then you were behind. But like now, if your deck's just like a bunch of instants and like a relatively, decent amount of cards that deal 3, you just have like a Lightning Strike or a Wizard's Lightning, or sometimes even a Skewer the Critics ready for their Wild Growth Walker. I've been really surprised. Like the red decks are just doing so much better against the Wild Growth Walker decks than they were for the past 2 seasons.
That's been my experience too. I think that the red decks got more natural counterplay out the gate. Their game plan isn't crippled by it a little bit less. And then Wild Growth Walker is just showing up in more decks that are full of cards that the red deck scoffs at.
I mean, it's great to be against the Wild Growth Walker deck where like tons of their permanents aren't even explore creatures, but they have a bazillion non-basic lands and cards that cost 5 or more.
Right.
The red deck loves that.
So, I don't know. I think this deck is really cool. I think Casualties of War is one of the most underplayed cards compared to how good it is.
Oh yeah, it's really, really cool.
I also I'm interested. I don't know enough about it, but I'm interested in how bold of a statement 4 main deck Assassin's Trophy is. I could believe it, because at a certain point you're just like, who cares? I'm all in.
Well, if you like look at the 5-color Dreadhorde deck, for example, this deck has 1 forest and end. Okay. Now let's look at Jeskai Super Friends that came in 2nd place. This deck has 1 island and end. Like, sure, you might get got with
that's an interesting point, because this deck also has 4 Field of Ruins too.
Yeah, you might get got with the first Assassin's Trophy, and you might not, right? They might have already played their basic. But after the first one,
that's interesting.
Every single one is free against these maniacs with these mana bases of like 26 non-basic lands.
That's interesting.
I mean, and the other thing is, like, as someone who's been on the wrong end of Assassin's Trophy a ton of times, like, the red deck just can't do anything with another mountain a lot of the time. So they have like 7 mountains in play. Big deal. Cards aren't powerful, right? Like, you're trying to get a high concentration of damage early, and then you get a ton of leverage on like 1 or 2 key permanents. If they just like whack that key permanent whether it's a Goblin Chain Whirler or a Chandra or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you just have another mountain instead, you're not happy. And I think like the way that the format has gone, Assassin's Trophy, it's better than it should be.
I could believe it. I mean, you're looking at these decks now. You do raise a good point. 4 Field of Ruin, 4 Assassin's Trophy, and it's funny too because once you start, like once they run out of land and you can actually go after their land, Casualties of War takes on a new meaning, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's.
You're getting a land each time for free off that one, just like right off top.
I mean, even like the mono green Super Friends deck that we looked at earlier that has Crucible Worlds in the sideboard. I mean, there's only 1 Field of Ruin in that deck, but if you lace those 2 cards together against one of these opposing Super Friends or Dreadhorde decks that have like no basic lands, like you've just got the machine gun, right? And that deck's got like Nissa's Triumph, Arboreal Ranger, and Wayward Swordtooth, which means that you could just be dumping extra lands alongside having Crucible Worlds. So I don't know. Like maybe it's correct to like really try to exploit that combination right now because they do not have enough basic lands to match you.
I could see it, man. It's interesting.
I mean, if it's me and I'm gonna go with like an archetype that I'd want to run with this week, I think I'd start with Matt Corbell's Mono Green Super Friends deck, or maybe hybridize some of the ideas in the Golgari deck, because I don't see a huge reason why I can't play black in this deck, right? Like you're not getting a lot just from being mono green, right? Like your Nissas and your Karns are not prejudiced against black, right? So you can exploit some of those additional synergies that Golgari has, and just kind of go to town against people's mana bases and their planeswalker bases. And I would definitely explore playing some non-artifact sideboard cards.
Yeah, same. My one last question. I mean, first of all, I'm still playing Grixis, and the kind of Grixis I'm playing, I actually play Duress main deck, and I'm playing.
How many?
How many Duresses main deck? 2 or 3. And then
2 is a good number.
What's that?
I think 2 is a good number. And it's great, and maybe more is good because it's good in most of the matchups. It's only kind of bad against White Weenie, right?
And then, I don't think it's off the table to consider an 8-pack, but I've been playing 2 or 3 Duresses main with 4 Thought Erasure alongside. And then I like Nico Bolas 5, Narset. I tried No, I did, but I cut it. I think I just don't want to play any creatures right now. I tried Thief of Sanity, Hostage Taker, Bolas 4, all those, Kefnet. I just don't want to play any creatures right now. I don't even play Augur of Bolas anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't want to play any creatures. Everybody has creature kill laying around, and I'm playing like right now. I have 1 Liliana, 1 Ugin, and I've been experimenting with 1 the Eldest Reborn. It's been okay. It's it's not the best time for it, but it's been okay.
Well, the Eldest Reborn is really benefits in a deck that's got Duress and Thought Erasure.
Definitely, yeah. The one I'm missing though, the tough part is I already got 4 Narset Parter Veils, but I wish I had another 3. Like I'm really missing Teferi Time Raveler when playing Grixis compared to Esper. And not having that Oathakea, not having Teferi Time Raveler. Narset does a lot of work, but it's just, you don't always draw it, and I kind of just want more 3s.
Do you have Bedevil?
Yeah, definitely, of course. Yeah, Bedevil, I got the mix of 2 Ungress Rampage, 2 Bedevil, 2 Bedeck.
Yep.
But, yeah, so that's what I'm jamming right now. One question I wanted to kind of, in closing, what happened to Mono Blue, man?
I think that Mono Blue's demise is overblown. I think like Mono Blue would be great right now. Seriously.
Are you playing any new cards? Like, I mean, I guess you could have either main or board, I guess, if you wanted. You could have Narset or Casmina. Like, what is it? Like, I don't know, man.
I don't think you'd want those planeswalkers. I think that mono blue is would be just outstanding to begin with against a lot of these planeswalker strategies. And I think that even the decks that are good against mono blue just stopped playing the cards that, helped put those matchups away. Like, I challenge you to find me a red deck in a top 8 that's got a lightning mare, right? They just don't play it.
Yeah, but this deck is like, you're still going to lose to red, right?
I actually found that the red matchup was way less busted for red than it was. Like, back in the day, like 2 cycles ago, red was a huge favorite against mono blue. But I think that changed a lot with the inclusion of cards like Surge Mare and Terramander. That, like, the matchup was still in favor of red, but had gotten way, way, way better in favor of blue. Like, by the time, like when Autumn Burchett won the Mythic Championship, and if you recall, Reed beat the mono red deck or the red green deck in the top 8 of that Pro Tour. And the thing is, like, if the mono red deck is not sideboarding against the mono blue deck, but the mono blue deck is sideboarding heavily against the mono red deck, for example, starts for Tempest Djinn, sure, and then has the addition of like Surge Mare and Entrancing Melody, I think the matchup is actually very, very, very winnable for mono blue.
Okay. Because I feel like against all these Planeswalker decks and everything, I like a version of Mono Blue with like actual just all 12, 4 Dive Down, 4 Spell Pierce, 4 Wizard's Retort. If you just max on that, that would be of interest to me.
So the thing I don't like about Mono Blue is that your signature card before was Curious Obsession, right? I think Curious Obsession it's tough right now.
Even with 4 Dive Down, 4 Spell Pierce?
Yeah, I think like Mono Blue's mana is so often committed. I mean, like, I guess Dive Down versus a Teferi activation is an okay matchup for you because your expectation is you're just going to kill the Teferi on the next swing.
Actually, that is a good point. Teferi is actually pretty brutal for this deck.
Like, that's the thing that I'm worried about.
You get to put it down, like you can put the Teferi down and bounce their guy and get rid of the Curious Obsession, and now they're locked out of all their permission.
Yeah, like that's the thing. I think that if you can keep the Teferi off the table, or exploit some cards that contain Teferi, then, like, for example, let's say you just don't play your Tempest Djinn and your mono blue deck now uses Blast Zone on 3, right? I'm just thinking this is like a thought experiment. Like, just, your Djinn stays in your hand for a while. These guys are putting down a lot of 3 casting cost planeswalkers. So, the mono blue deck is like, all right, you can go ahead and do that. You're generating some advantages. I'm going to sweep the board, and then I'm going to get my Obsession back on and have my Dive Down and my Spell Pierce going. And also, like, if you just go like 1-drop, 2-drop, and you leave up Spell Pierce, they might not resolve their Teferi. I think that's like a real thing.
Yeah, that's true. Do you think Casmina's Transmutation could be okay for them? 2 mana turn something into a 1/1? Yeah. Like, just as a sideboard card? I don't mean the main deck, but it feels like they might be in the market for that. Like, or do you just like the stuff that locks creatures down better?
I think, like, if it's me, I'd be more apt to play like the 2 casting cost, the Mass Mana War. But
why?
Because I love a mana.
Sounds so bad. I don't know, man. That sounds awful. Then they just replay the Lyra Dawnbringer next turn.
That is a possibility. Or you can just like bounce it and then counter it when it comes back down. Like, I understand that that's like a 1-for-2, but got him a solid, and you have an additional power on offense.
Casmina's Transmutation, it just seems to me that it could be okay as a role player. Like, the thing's not even flying anymore. You're just leaving him with a 1/1, but it's like a 2-mana sorcery speed Terminate in mono blue is kind of interesting, even if it leaves him with a 1/1. Right? Like,
I played a lot of Afterlife back in the day. Not the Afterlife, the mechanic, like the horrible 2 removal spell that gave him a 1/1 flyer.
Right.
Because you just had to take out their key guy sometimes, right? It's like, so it stinks I spent 3 mana and I'm down a card. But, you know, if they've got like some super key creature that if you eliminate it, you're going to win, then, you know, pay that extra cost. I think it's about the same thing. This is a better card, actually, than Afterlife.
Yeah. And it's not like everybody's playing tons of key creatures or whatever, but at least it's something.
I do think you want to be able to contain a card like Niv Mizzet. Right, so Niv Mizzet isn't like the most popular creature right now, but he is still played. And
Skargan Hellkite also seems like a nightmare.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah. Skargan Hellkite less than Niv Mizzet, but both of those cards are pretty difficult to beat.
Yeah. All right, awesome, man. Definitely exciting already, just this much, you know, crazy standard action, and looking forward to seeing what next week brings. Plus, Modern Horizons, finally, you know, I want to see what kind of impact Modern Horizons has on Modern.
Oh, yeah. Or, you know, there's pre-release this weekend, right? So if you guys want to go check that out, I am going to try to pre-release this weekend, and if I play, I'll let you know how I do.
Sweet. See you next week, man.
Bye-bye.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play Dredge, so jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind.